So, 2012 rolls around, and the New 52 happens. DC reboots their entire franchise, changing a lot of fundamental things that everyone pretty much takes for granted, and they get a backlash. Okay, I get it. I didn't want, like, especially at the time I was heavily into the Bat family titles, and I didn't want the story to end. I didn't want Bruce to be the Batman again. I loved Batman Inc., which did continue after the New 52, but it was the fact that, you had this new status quo, and it it's it was running since, I think 1 year later. It, I think it was 1 year, the 1 year later leap where all DC Comics took a leap forward to actually get things done and whatnot. From there to right before the New 52 happened was all an unbroken block of here's continuity. Yeah, before the 1 year later. But what the hell is up with people? Like, fine, I get it. I really liked where DC was before the New 52. I could live with it. I really loved the Red Robin storyline. I loved Detective Comics. I loved, and yes, I was more into the Bat Family than I was into most any other thing. But that was me, especially with the Nightwing love. But right now, nobody's seen. When people talk about DC hate, they come off as though they've never actually read more than one review of a comic from 2 years ago. I mean, Red Hood and the Outlaws, number one, I still dislike it. Horribly, horribly dislike it. The comic itself got better. In fact, most complaints that happened in 2012 upon release is just that they were released in this day and age. It was fucking day one bugs. Talking video gaming here. They were, yeah, day one bugs that were patched. Yes, I know. A lot of people are going to turn around and go, but that's not fair, because comics are always supposed to be good. Link Carr wouldn't have a job if all comics were always good. But quickly, the start of this rant came from on the forums that, someone was just bitching about how DC was the worst entity ever to ever exist. And I really disagree with that. Because, let's face it, yes, DC editorial has screwed up. And I will get into that in a little bit. But the problems that actually started with the New 52 had nothing to really deal with editorial. It had to deal with day one stories. A lot of people keep turning around and saying, "Oh, they're making everyone into Batman," and I get that. And let's go over the fact that I don't even know who posted it, but there was that big thing that when Dan DiDio turned around and said, "Oh, we're writing for 52 or 42-year-olds, or we're writing for the people in their 40s." Yeah, at face value, that statement is completely retarded. Yes, I'm using the word retarded, not in the. Anyways, so he says this, and I understand what he meant. Everyone turns around and rabble, rabble, rabble. Comics should be all ages, rabble, rabble. But I get what he meant. And no, I'm not saying that it's smart, because yes, every comic company should have all ages titles, or at least be accessible from, an earlier age than, late 30s. But the content should, DC has always had a more, for lack of a better phrase, mature storytelling. Don't get me wrong, Marvel has had some stellar stories that dealt with, very mature themes, but they've always been more geared towards, oh, hey, let's play hero. And, the kids that, basically just that. Kids, even when they try for really, really mature storytelling, sometimes they do great. Sometimes they fail. That's what companies do. But Marvel's main continuity, as a whole, focuses a lot more on, I don't want to say gags, but that's kind of it. It's all about comeback writing. It's for lack of a better term, it's it's a modern Silver Age feel. It's not a matter of, man, let's give Captain America, a hard-ass backstory. Although, apparently for Marvel now, they, did. But Marvel now is its own thing that really irked the hell out of me, because it wasn't an actual event. Anyways, so why I like DC. I do like the mature storytelling over, say, crap. Anyways, I do like the mature storytelling that comes across. Like, I mean, there's no way Death of the Family would have ever been really spectacular had they not had the build-up. But, like I said, I understand why people don't like that statement. I completely agree. I completely understand. I agree, but I also don't. Like, DC did narrow down a lot of their all ages, and they did narrow down their accessibility outside of, a demographic. Yes, they've got record sales, but they've also, got record fan hate, which brings me to probably the biggest thing, and my personal biggest annoyance, is when everyone keeps talking about the whole DC marriage mandate that states that no marriage mandate, no character can get married ever. Say for Aquaman and Mira, I'm not even sure how that goes, and Buddy Baker over on Animal Man, he can have a family because that's actually in his story. But and no one ever actually just talks about how it's no marriage. It's a matter of, oh man, Batwoman couldn't marry Maggie. That sucks. Yeah, I've been following Batwoman since issue 1 of New 52, and before, but I've been following her since issue 1 of the New 52 continuity. And the marriage wasn't a make or break the character thing. This wasn't like turning around to Spider-Man and going, no, no, no. He needs to have those organic web shooters. We have them in the movie. They did that, but it's Marvel. The marriage was, you could tell they were building to it, but you could also kind of tell after they turned around and said, editorial wasn't really at fault. I already know I have 150 billion people hating me for saying that, but when you are, I don't know if this is the same for comic writers, but when I was a staff writer on things I'm not allowed to talk about, yes, you are telling the story, but when it comes to the character's destiny, I don't want to use the word destiny because that feels weird. But when it comes to the character's life, you aren't the sole proprietor. You don't turn around and this is what's going to happen in the character's life. You set out this storyline. It can be the best storyline in the world, but ultimately the character isn't owned by you. As the writer, you're hired to write. That's true. But you're hired to write for a company. That's honestly like everyone bitching about, oh, those writers were in the right, DC fucked them over. They didn't. They did, but they didn't. It was, and like I said, I am talking mostly from my own personal experience, but it seems more like they had how they wanted the story to go. Fine, no problem. Then they pushed, hey, we got to get these characters married. Didio or someone just turned around and said, no, let's not do a marriage. We don't want to do that. We don't want to alienate the fans. And then the writers turn around and, press their, well, if we don't do this, fuck you, we'll leave. Fine, leave. That's pretty much it. And then, but nowadays, since everyone can turn around and just start bitching about their bosses, about this, that, and everything else, all of a sudden it became the worst thing ever. DC is anti-homosexuals. DC hates their fans. DC treats their writers like crap. Okay, DC might treat their writers like crap. I'm not saying so. I never got to be a writer. They didn't hire me when I asked. I'm over it. I mean, hell, I'm still reading their stuff. I'm not turning around going, well, I'm boycotting this because I just don't like them. But as a writer, it's your job to write what you are hired to write. See, I'm all for creator purity. It's a working phrase. But creator purity for Batman would have been in 1940, whatever the hell, with Bob Kane and Bill Finger. That is artist purity. The rest is just canon fanfic, pretty much. And that's pretty much what an EIC does. An editor-in-chief turns around and goes, that's great. No, that won't work. And everything like that. Again, some of my facts may be off. Like I said, I've never worked officially in the comic book company, or in the comic book industry, or any company. I'd love to, trust me. And I understand people who have legitimate, like they don't like the writing on Red Hood and the Outlaws. Hey, when #1 came out, I was on the bandwagon that it fucking sucked and that Red Hood and the Outlaws would never get better. It did. Granted, yes, not all titles are great, but it's a company that has so many, comics coming out. Not everything is going to be 150% awesome. Some things we'll have to build. Infinity #1 from Marvel. A lot of people told me that was great. I read it. It was nothing but talking. I didn't like it. In DC, it's the same thing. But nowadays, let me rephrase. But instead of turning around and going, well, I don't like the company, I'm not interested in anything I've read from them so far, I'm just not going to buy them, as a common person would do, everyone has to turn around and make sure they have a solid, clear, perfect reason for why they're not buying it, oh, they're racist, they're sexist. I got flamed about a year ago when I turned around and said, I'd rather have a well-written white character than a piss-poor token character. Token characters and just the woman there to be the woman without really any character or anything like that. I'd rather have a well-written character than a what the hell kind of than your stock. Here's all of our nationalities together. Hey, look, we're all stereotypes because that's all we can actually write about. Because I think I'm ranting about something else there, but long story short is that DC gets a lot of flack, and I understand it. I do. They do have horrible press. Dan DiDio does seem to think that whatever he says, I think more it's that, he's never really prepared to do it, is his problem. But DC hate is less about logical, okay, here is why I dislike. And a lot more people are just, oh, they heard that, they heard about how this just was such a horrible thing. The stories are still great. On some, obviously. But, like Batwoman. I'm going back to this because my biggest issue with a lot of people now is just how horrible they treat DC, because supposedly DC treats everyone so horribly. I know, right? And my biggest thing, yes, there was the whole Gail Simone fiasco, and apparently she broke the company's communication policy, which is why she was fired. Yes, being fired through email is really bad, but she wasn't fired just out of the blue. She broke contract, and anyone who's worked on a job, or maybe not a 9 to 5, I haven't really worked one of those in a while, but anyone who's worked on a job, who's had to deal with contracts, knows that in said contract are stipulations that to break it. Anyone who's leased an apartment or a house knows that your lease can be broken if you do some stupid shit. And the problem there is that the only reason Gail got hired back is because fanboys. It wasn't that Batgirl wasn't one of the best titles to come out of DC's New 52, not by a long shot. It was really middle of the road. It has good moments, it has bad, but it was fan bitching. The only reason she has a job at DC right now is popular backlash. But what else is there? I mean, everyone will have their opinion. I'm not turning around and saying that disliking DC over Marvel, or turning around and saying I don't read DC is a bad thing. I'm saying having information. Like, a lot of time I get flack because I turn around and, if someone has a differing opinion than me, I will bring up my opinion, and, we would discuss our opinion. Most people aren't, a lot of people nowadays aren't aware of that, and they automatically assume that I'm attacking them because the internet has become... Okay, I'm not going to make that broad statement, but just on a cultural level, we're not used to discussing ideas. We're not used to going, I see your point. However, I mean, yeah, I know a couple people who love saying, I understand your point. However, here's why you're fucking wrong. But that's not really the point of saying, I understand your opinion. Yours differ from mine. Whatevs. Let's still discuss, because, clearly you know the source, and clearly you can talk about it like a logical adult, instead of turning around and going, no, I'm just boycotting because I'm a fucking angry fanboy. There's a difference between boycotting something and not reading something. There's a difference between going, man, I know all the sides of this, so clearly they're in the wrong. A lot of DC's stuff does get filtered through a hell of a lot of internet. And look at WB right now. One DC movie, Man of Steel 2, has over 1 million rumors. Yes, I'm just pulling a number out of my ass there, but over 1 million rumors. Actually, I might not be that far off. All saying different things, all that and that. But hey, everyone still gets to bitch about it. You know, even a lot of the gag ones still get fucking bitched about. Solely because DC's the devil. And yeah, it's WB who does it, but it's a DC movie. Another one. DC, it was like a month or so ago. Not even a month. DC had that whole, oh, DC's lying to fucking children now article. Because DC turned around and said, hey, our movies, have grossed, over what Marvel's movies have. And then everyone's saying, no, that's not. Yeah, it's technically true because DC has released most of, if not all their movies through Warner Brothers, thus giving them, over a dozen movies. Whereas Marvel Studios only has 4 or 5. Oh, okay. 8, I think. Which, yes, they're still banking billions of dollars, but they're still less than DC. And then you also had, them not answering questions and whatnot, but really, the kid's question was, oh, so what's actually going to be in this? And, but it was, it was, people vilify DC, and people canonize, or deify, whichever way you want to say, or whichever way you want to go, Marvel. Marvel can do no wrong because of the Avengers movie. Which, yes, that is going to be another vlog post because I'm sick and tired of everyone telling me how much I supposedly hate that movie. I do hate that movie, but I enjoyed watching it. But people vilify DC because they changed the most. People deify Marvel because they're like your stoner best friend. And why I like DC more than, DC is not my favorite company out right now. That does go to Valiant, but Valiant also, if we want to go overall universal, not just currently. Yes, DC has better stories and everything. Valiant right now is one of my favorite. It's actually second. It might be tied for first, but we're not going with that. So, anyways, but back to, I prefer DC because yes, while DC has some really bad, well, I don't even think their bad books are bad. They're just boring as all hell. But even then, there's few and far between. But you get everything from DC. You can get. Yes, I know. I can make a couple STD jokes, but I'm not going to. But you can. Your taste, DC has it. I'm not saying Marvel doesn't, but you've got DC. How can I phrase this? DC has a great spectrum. Marvel has an okay spectrum, but you can tell what they focus on a lot more than DC. Yes, you can turn around and go Superman, Batman, but, at least the Batman stories are good. At least the Superman stories are... Okay, I really haven't been reading the Superman stories since Action Comics #1. But you can at least, say, hey, they're focusing on that. That's at least a great story. Death of the Family is actually one of my favorite storylines of all time now. Yeah, I know, right? And Throne of Atlantis is getting there, but I haven't finished reading it yet. So, long story short, hate DC, but hate it with logic. God, that was a rant and a half. I'm the Archivist, signing off.